Alright, so I'm going to walk through converting a class from this common.js type format of Tone.js to the new TypeScript format. The class that I'm going to use, for example, is going to be this reverb class, and we'll convert the reverb and the test. So if everything's installed, I'm just going to confirm that we're on the TypeScript branch, which we are. Everything's installed, and I'm going to start watching the TypeScript files. And I find the easy place to start is using this thing called Lebab, which will convert a JavaScript class to, or a function class to new ES6 class notation. For it to work, first I need to do sort of a find and replace of all of the references of tone dot, because it won't find tone, so it won't be able to convert it. So now it looks something like this. This will probably be able to be converted by Lebab, so let's find out. So I'm going to do Lebab, tone, effect, reverb, transform the class, output it to reverb.ts. Now let's open reverb.ts. It's going to have a lot of errors, and we're just going to work through all of them. Alright, but it did get sort of the baseline class in here. So the first thing that I'm going to do, we'll get rid of these because we're going to import them with sort of TypeScript imports. We'll convert this to tabs to make the linter a little happier. Let's try again. Sometimes it doesn't work, the automated conversion, so we'll just kind of unindent and reindent everything. It looks like it fixed a lot of them. Also, because TypeScript has sort of a different comment format, we don't need the same sort of JS doc comments, like extend is going to now be in here. Let it auto import. All of the classes get a name now, read-only name. And now we'll start moving all of its attributes to TypeScript format. So the TypeScript format is that we'll put them above the constructor. These fields are private, so we'll just mark it as such. Again, we don't need this type anymore, because we'll type it here. Decay is of type time, and we'll set that in the constructor. And we'll import time from the module here, and it helps the build process of everything is just relative paths. So sometimes it will import absolute, and just need to make that relative. So pre-delay is also another time unit. We're getting an error here that it's not initialized. We'll initialize it here. first we'll deal with this constructor. So let's take a look at effect.ts, and maybe we'll take a look at it sort of a finished effect to get a sense of how feedback delay, for example. So this is what the constructor should basically look like. It'll probably have three options. It'll take the reverb, partial of the reverb options, which we'll define in a second. It will take whatever the previous parameters were, so in this case decay, which is a time, and then it'll take no arguments also. And we will define these. Let's import this. Again, make it relative. This will be reverb get defaults, which we'll define right now, which is a static class. Get defaults, and it returns the reverb options. Let's define reverb options. We'll just base it off of the previous defaults here. Interface reverb options. How to spell interface correctly. And it's a decay, which is a time, and a pre-delay, which is also a time. And the rest of the options, like dry, wet, its context, everything else like that, we'll get from the parent class. We'll deal with that in a second. All right, back to here, reverb options. So we will return an assigned copy of the parent's defaults with the defaults as they were already. We will put this in the new format. That looks good. Okay, so now we have an options object, which is reverb options. It's the completed reverb options, which is what this does, but it needs to know what our parameter list looks like. So this is the parameter list. So basically here it's going to be when given no options, when given no arguments, take a look at the arguments object and assume that it's in this order. So if we take a look at reverb delay, it's got two parameters, or it takes an options object, which is a partial options object, or it takes no arguments. And those arguments are delay time and feedback. And this function will bundle everything up into a single options object. We need two of those because TypeScript won't let you define this above this. It throws an error. So most of the time I've just been putting it twice. There is a little performance overhead, but we'll manage. I think eventually TypeScript will have a version that lets us do something like this without throwing an error. All right, so now we'll assign this.decay equals options.decay, and this is decay when it's defined. Will be whatever was passed in either here or in the options object, and otherwise it would be the defaults. Same thing with pre-delay, options.pre-delay. This is inherited from the parent object, which is effect. All right, so effect also, if we take a look at it, wants the options object to be passed into it. So we'll do that. We'll pass in the reverb options. And now it should be a little happier. And now we have connect effect. I find it clear to just keep it on multiple lines like this, so I'll just disable this rule. And this looks like a pretty good start. as I said before, we don't need the same old JS docs. We don't need to have type anymore because type is going to be defined here. So we'll just remove all the type attributes like here. This will actually be like that. All right, let's get the generate function. So generate an impulse response. Just put that on one line, it's a little easier to read. And now we'll go through, we need tone.offline, but everything will just be imported directly. So we'll import offline from core, I think it's in core context. Yeah. And we'll switch this to this async await. It'll be much easier to read. So const buffer equals await offline, and then we'll just move all of this into the offline callback. We'll set the convolver to the response, and we'll return this. And this is needing a decay. And the decay needs to be a number, so we'll convert it to a number. Oops. 2 seconds. So this is if decay is given in some kind of other time units that are not seconds, this will work. Alright, comment that out for a sec. Let's remove all of the calls to tone, and we'll just import them directly from the classes that they're at. So import merge, gain, and noise from their absolute paths, which will move to relative paths. This linter is good at just fixing stuff that it can, so we don't need to worry about that. Alright, let's see, what other API changes have there been? Let's return this, that'll get rid of this issue. Decay and pre-delay, so they're not actually a time. I think it's going to be much easier if they are seconds instead of time. So seconds is a number, it's just an alias for a number, but it comes up with this nice little info. So just switch all the references to seconds. These are some of the kind of judgment calls that you got to make in this process. And we could always make it more specific later. It could be time down the road, but I think seconds is a good place to start. We'll also export this class while we're at it. All right. So merge has also changed a little. So we want to create 2 noise objects and merge them left and right. So this is just the easiest way to do that. This is the left and the right. The dispose is also now slightly different. If we don't include any JS docs here, it will actually just be inherited by the parent class, which is nice. So we remove that. And we can also call super.dispose here, which will get rid of all of the stuff, and we only need to dispose what we've created, which is the convolver node. And we won't nullify convolver anymore. That was causing some errors, and it'll also cause a TypeScript error because then we need to define convolver up here as possibly being null, which is going to complicate everything else. So we just won't bother nullifying in the dispose, and it'll still be able to garbage collect it, assuming that everything else is working okay. Dispose is just helpful. It's not entirely necessary. It's helpful to dispose any of the web audio things that we've created, just so that the web audio garbage collection process can clean things up. Now we've gotten rid of all of the errors. This functionality is still a little different. So this is potentially undefined. So we're just going to do, we know that there is an audio buffer in here, so we're just going to do that. Okay. Now let's convert the test file and see if this actually does what we think it does. So I'll start by just creating a test file in the same folder as the effect. So this is also a little different than the previous organization was, and I'm just going to name it the name of the class .test. And I'm going to start by just copy pasting everything over. It's going to give me a bunch of errors for things that have moved, so that I know is there. This can just be like that now. Source oscillator is in there. And we need to, now nothing exports default, everything exports a named object, so in basic, it's called basic tests. Oh, and it doesn't have expect. And try. We'll let the linter take care of a lot of these things because it's got a lint fix. We'll remove all the functions and convert them to newer functions. Now the linter has helped us out in fixing most of these things. We got an error here. Oh, this returns a promise. We'll just skip this test for a second and come back to it. The way that you would test this file is doing test, and then we can grep for this specific file name. Takes a second for these tests to get started. Got a couple warnings, but the test's passed. I think there was an issue with Firefox. Seems like it didn't fire up, but we'll just change the references that it's looking for to the new API, which is to destination. Let's see if this test works again. Cool. Looks like it passed. This is going to require a little more taking a look at because I think this API has changed. So we'll just fix the TypeScript error and then mark the test as skipped and maybe make a note about why we're skipping it for now, and we'll come back to that one. So that is how we would start converting a Reverb class to the updated Tone.js TypeScript API.